community. And so this is our third event. We're really excited. We've gotten an amazing response from all of you and from people that have been part of it. And so we're inspired. And we have three incredible speakers today that I'm going to describe in a second. Remember, the goal of this initiative is to equip the Latino community with invaluable knowledge and skills to seize the opportunities within the booming industry and just project, your bottom line to be in the millions and in the billions. This initiative consists not only on this series of webinars, but we also include the launch of our tech reports. This year, we'll be issuing the fourth tech report, very focused on AI in September. Please be in the look for it, and we're very proud of it. With that, let's go to the meat of the program. And I'm going to introduce the speakers. It's an honor to have each one of them. We at the LDC work with them. One of them is our board member, and we just learn so much from them every time. I'm going to start with Dr. Jose Morey. Jose Morey is the CEO of Ad Astra Media. He is renowned for his work with NASA and the White House, the Office of Science and Technology. And Dr. Jose is an entrepreneur. He's also a content creator, and he's a doctor, as the name says. So he's a multitasking, multi-talented leader in our community. The second person is Marcelo DeSantis. And Marcelo is the executive advisor at ThoughtWorks, with vast experience in digital transformation and corporate innovation, a leader within our community also, and so many wealth of knowledge to share today from him. Third, and last but not least, is our board member, LDC board member, Guillermo Diaz Jr., and he will be the moderator, even though he obviously will be contributing as much as everybody else. He has a tremendous wealth of information to share. He's the founder and CEO of Conectado. He's also the former CIO of Cisco. And as a board member, he's a visionary leader dedicated to advanced diversity in the tech sector and helping us at the LDC to be leaders for that. So with that, please help me welcome Dr. Jose, Marcelo, and Guillermo.
Thank you, Ana. Thank you, and for your kind words. A lot of claps there for Ana. So great to be here. Ana, if you recall, this is our third edition of the LDC AI series. So our first edition, I want to go back to that a little bit because, when Ana and I talked about, there's something going on in the world. This thing AI is really popping. We need to, we have to be in front of it. And we as Latinos have to be in front of it because why? Because we're the growth engine of the United States. And who better than to grow the economy than the growth engine? And so we launched a series, the first edition, last March. And in that series, we really talked about the basics of AI. What is the large language model? What is the immersive experience that are coming about? We had, at that time, we had somebody called Sammy Montecristo, who was, in my opinion, one of the first that laid a brick in the metaverse and one of the first that really got his hands on AI. And the second edition was really in the September timeframe when we launched the report.
The third tech report.
The third tech report, but the first of its kind that related back to AI. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And we launched that in September. And in that, and you have a little tiny barcode there that you can connect to, and I'll come back to it at the end. So you'll be able to download the full plethora of LDC reports, as well as the Latinos in AI report. And in that, we went through what were not only what's the broad scope of the Latinos in the United States, but also the impact on things like the economy, right? What is going on with the economy? Latinos, 3.2 trillion in GDP, the 5th largest economy in the world. And if we look at promoting this, the impact on the GDP and the impact of Latinos on that GDP is immense. So I wanted to start with that and then look at what has happened. What has happened over the last, actually 70 years, maybe 80 years. But what's really impactful is in the last 2 years, there has been no application, no technology that has had the adoption that generative AI has had. 100 million users in 2 months after being launched. So this is a really impactful statement. And then you look at the distribution. Where are the Latinos? They're in the places where those jobs are. So my dear friends, my dear Jose, my dear Marcelo, who I've worked with for many, many years. So first of all, I want to take us back to what is AI? Let's start maybe, Jose, let's do a little bit of a calibration. Can you tell us from your perspective, you have such a wealth of knowledge, especially in the medical field, but can you give us a little breakdown on what is AI?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here tonight, and thank you to Anna and the LDC as well for this opportunity to have this discussion. And it's a really important discussion. It's amazing, all the work that LDC and Guillermo with your leadership and with Anna's leadership that you guys have been really focusing on around this particular subject matter. I think it's vitally important, as you know, from the work that we've been doing together and myself as well. At a high level, really what I tell everybody, artificial intelligence, it's an umbrella term for a lot of different types of computer algorithms, from natural language processing to machine learning to deep learning, computer vision, kind of the list goes on and on and on, that do things from a calculation perspective, that look at data, use mathematics, and then have an output. So really simplistically, what you can think of artificial intelligence, it's just data plus mathematics. It's large amounts of data, and then it's complex mathematics, but that's really all it is. And one of the reasons, as you showed that one slide, going back to the 50s, we've had this concept of artificial intelligence really, that kind of was coined out of professors in Dartmouth and folks in Dartmouth and kind of generated, but you can go even back farther to Ada Lovelace and really give her the credit for developing the first thought process of computer algorithms, which I think tends to be overseen. And we've had, people talk about hype cycles for all sorts of technologies. Artificial intelligence is definitely one of them that have had kind of peaks and valleys in that cycle. But one of the reasons that we've had kind of a perpetual plateau now for the last 10 to 20 years for this new wave of AI specifically is because we've gotten to a point, well, two major things. One has been the fact that we've been able to have the processing speed to be able to take advantage of the algorithms that have been around forever. And that really comes from the gaming industry. So it really started originally from, advanced GPUs, which is why, companies like NVIDIA, if any of you follow these companies, why they've been doing so well, because they've really been a leader from a gaming processing perspective for a long time, and they just kind of caught this wave when it came to artificial intelligence. But now we have new processors that are specifically focused on different types of algorithms that have been developed that other competitors are starting to generate as well. But then the other major component of why we've had this perpetual plateau is because we have vast amounts of digitized data. This is the first time in human history that we've been able to have all this digitized data that we can actually take advantage of. So now we're still seeing processing be a limitation. So that's definitely why processors and why there's this huge, space race, if you will, to be able to generate the best processors. That's why even at a geopolitical level, the CHIPS Act that the administration has done has been so vitally important, because everything we're doing really focuses on that. And that's, you know, a key cornerstone to everything that we do in the underpinning of it. But we've never had this amount of digitized data that we've been able to take advantage of. And the other limitation that we still have that we're finding is energy. Energy is a big component, and that's always going to be something that's always very competitive and very challenging, but those are kind of the very limiting steps. But for the most part, this is a very unique time in history that we've been able to take this data and take advantage of the processing speed that we have to be able to do everything we do in everyday life. And AI is ubiquitous in everything that we do. And sometimes we don't even understand that we're actually using it, but it actually is involved in our day-to-day, whether it's finishing your text messages, anticipating what you're going to ask to watch, or anticipating your Google search, or automating what your email response will be. It's quite impressive how
it was kind of already doing that, right? Because I mean, I remember, you know, even thinking about golf shoes, and the next thing I know, I get an ad for golf shoes, and that's even before we thought about AI, right? And now to your point, is it's starting to now, maybe do things for us that we weren't maybe able to do before. You know, one of the things, Jose, as you know, we work with, and I have my own AI now, right, called GAI. And an interesting fact is that we get to work with students. And one of the challenges a couple of weeks ago is they were having a problem with their code, and with, they couldn't figure out a problem. So they asked GAI. And GAI was able to not only pinpoint the problem, but give them steps on how to go about fixing it. And that's something that G could probably not do, but GAI certainly could do, right? But that's, I think, where you're getting at. Maybe Marcelo, from your standpoint, so Marcelo has a wealth of knowledge from being a CTO, a CIO, digital transformation. And if I think about that, one of the specialties, Marcelo, that you bring to the table is design thinking, and how we go about, introducing AI. From your view, how do you see, how would you look at AI? How would you define it? And then maybe an example of something that you're doing with it.
No, absolutely. Well, first, thank you, Guillermo, Ana, and LDC, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with all the community, and thanks for all you do for our community in the United States. Look, I mean, Jose has provided a very descriptive description of AI. I mean, the only thing I want to add is, what you showed before, Guillermo, that exponential growth of generative AI specifically. I think that moment, as you showcase that chart, has been pivotal, not only for the technology industry, but also for all of us, in terms of, once you have something like OpenAI or generative AI in your phone, in your smartphone, things change. When you consumerize any technology to that point, adoption just goes exponentially. The only thing I want us to reflect, I work with many different companies on how do we use these large language models or AI in the past to help their organizations or services. Is there are many copilots in the market, right? Like Jose was mentioning before, and these systems can generate code, draft our emails, generate a contract, enabling us in many different ways. But the reason I think we call them copilots is because, in my opinion, this is an emerging technology in many aspects. There are some risks that we still, do not quite understand fully. So my comment here, and with this I finish, is the reason they call copilots is because we want humans to still be the pilots, right? At least for now, right? Keeping our hands on the wheel of generative AI, because it is for us to be augmented and not be replaced at the moment. This will continue to grow. This will continue to be more powerful. and hopefully we grow it in a way that is inclusive and good for business, for the planet, and for humanity in general, right? So that is my perspective on AI. I'm very optimistic about technology. Best time to be in the technology industry, no doubt, but with the hands on the wheel.
Yeah. I heard a couple of leaders, both in the business world and political world and in education. I've heard even yesterday, I heard something from Mark Cuban, and about a couple of weeks back from Jensen Huang, who is the CEO, the founder of NVIDIA. And if anyone hasn't really looked at that keynote speech from their last all hands or their last customer experience, you should go visit that. Jensen Huang, NVIDIA. It talks about the whole transformation of AI, but not only that big spike, but also the need for infrastructure, the need for employment, the need for those that we've, if I think about employment in the Latino community, we think about how are we being replaced, or should we be looking at this is a level moment, this is a light speed moment. How can Latinos, we're all in the same playing field, right? Everyone in the world. So why not take advantage of this wave, as we talked about, this wave, this AI wave, the Latino wave, those two converging, to be able to go say, hey, if anyone's going to get educated, if anyone's going to augment their job, why not me? Why not us? Because we're the growth engine. So I want to maybe unpack that a little bit, Jose, from the kind of the employment side. And do we think it will replace jobs, or do you think it will augment jobs? And what's your perspective on that?
Wow. First thing I would say is you can't spell Latino without AI. So I would take that one into perspective. My view on it is similar to Marcelo's view. I think based on what he just mentioned is, and what I tell people is that in the short term and even in the medium term, AI won't replace you. Pick your professional du jour, right? Me as a doctor, so I have a lot of doctor friends since my years at IBM. Be like, Jose, why are you trying to eliminate our jobs? Why are you working with the tech industries to kind of develop this? And lo and behold, look, I've been doing this now for almost 20 years, and I don't know if you've tried to make an appointment with any kind of subspecialist, but it's even more difficult now than it was in the last decade or two. And that's just the reality. Even though we actually now have, from when I first started practicing medicine, 0 FDA-approved AI applications that were actually in clinical use. And now we have hundreds of FDA-approved AI applications that are in clinical use. So the reality is that AI is not going to replace you in the short term, medium term, any professional, but the professional that uses AI will replace the professional that does not use AI, because it's a tool. And that's really the most important thing that we have to learn, is that just like a hammer, a saw, a screwdriver are all fantastic tools for their specific jobs, AI is a tool for its specific job. And you have to understand both what it's good for, what jobs does it do really, really well, and what it's not good for, what jobs is it not useful for and shouldn't be utilized for. And to reiterate kind of Marcelo's point, ultimately it's an augmentation. And if you yourself as an expert don't understand the fundamentals, like when I am teaching folks or talking with folks about coding or whatnot, it's a great tool, like you mentioned, to kind of figure out and solve problems. But you also have to, if you are not really knowledgeable, it can hallucinate, it can confabulate, it can cause more harm and errors than it actually can help. If you don't have the skill set, the advanced skill set enough to really understand that what it's saying is wrong, then that's an issue. And then ultimately, since going back to the basics, it's just data and mathematics. The mathematics can be biased. Like you can start weighing different different components more, but that's really easy to kind of look at. We can actually even set up applications to evaluate whether something is being weighed abnormally and then fix that. So computational bias is pretty simplistic to look at. But the data bias, which comes either from the people that are segmenting the data, annotating the data, choosing what data sets are being utilized, that's harder because people might have intentional or unintentional bias that they put into it. And then systemic bias, which comes from how was that data originally created, that's even more complex. And the thing is that the AI applications that are out there, we're starting to see that it is perpetuating or can perpetuate inequalities. And if we are not careful with understanding and evaluating where those data sets are coming from, then it can actually cause a problem, which is why even it's more important for Latinos to be in the discussion, because if, as that old adage says, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? So understanding that we need to be a part of this, we need to be at the table, we need to be working and being knowledgeable in these things so that we can make sure that we are shaping our future and the future of the technology and the future of the industry.
Yeah, I want to come back. I'm going to come back to bias because I think that's one that I want to unpack a little bit more. So Marcelo, from what from the corporate perspective, maybe even the CTOs, what are they thinking about relative to job replacement, or how do I improve my corporate business in terms of improvement of automation, improvement of am I going to lose jobs in these corporations, or what do you think?
I think G is, fully agree with what Jose said before. I mean, I think we're still a bit away from replacing jobs, right, in at scale. I see AI, generative AI specifically, maybe replacing some activities, right, which is far away from being replacing a job. But what I see in our clients basically is last year has been a year of, I would say, understanding, experimentation, some proof of concepts, right? What we're seeing in the first quarter of this year, the conversation transition into scaling up this as enterprise capability, and the challenges we see in companies that on one side, as I said before, there are some AI risks that are still not well understood, right? Some of these proof of concepts that we have done in companies are maybe just focus on one activity or too bespoke, so they do not scale up easily. And technology complexity to scale up generative AI in organizations is something that sometimes we have minimized, right? Because getting to a proof of concept is very easy, but scaling it up as an enterprise capability is a completely different game. And it's not only from the technology standpoint, but also from the talent you need, from the software engineering practices you need in organizations. And when you put all this together, what you see CTOs and CEOs struggling is everyone wants to calculate the return on investment of these things. And when you have all these unknowns still, or things that you're still trying to experiment and understand, becomes difficult, right? So now, back to what we see in enterprises and replacing jobs. I think my biggest question, right, for all of us is, I think in one of your charts, G, you show there is a McKinsey statistic that says that global GDP resulting from using AI, generative AI, is around $15 trillion, right? And it should be, I think I saw it over there. And on one side, you can look at that number as economic value. Hopefully, we distribute that equitable. But what I am concerned or curious, or I want to focus, is what are we going to do with all those hours, right? So that's where we need to think humans what we do with that free time that we're going to have going forward. And to Jose's point, can we use more creativity? Can we use more critical thinking, right? Can we be more empathetic with many things that happen across the world? Can we build organizations that basically are more human than machines, right? Because machines will do all the work that maybe we do today, but we can use our brain and our hearts to do better things for our organizations and for humanity. So when I see the 14 trillion, I don't see only the money, but I see those amount of hours that we're going to be able to do completely different things.
Right. I'm gonna jump into back on now. I'm gonna want to tie it back to the Latino demographic and our opportunity ahead of us. If you look at this chart right here, right, just in employment, we think about where the jobs are coming from. They're coming from this growth engine. And if you think about if that's the growth engine, and if 75% of the companies that plan to use and adopt AI, and by the way, those tend to be more businesses and corporations, but and then you look at the number of businesses that are starting up, they happen to be majority Latino, and many of those are starting from ground zero, from using technology, using AI, because these jobs will change. They're changing already in the next 5 years, and this number is probably blown away by even 1 year ago. But this is the growth engine, and if we think about all of these things, the waves coming together, and I just kind of want to tie that back, and then go into, by the way, the growth engine still is down, even more downstream. All the students, all my family, these kids are on, they know better the games, and they're already playing with AI and all this stuff, more than I have. And there's 5.2 million students just in the Hispanic serving institutions, and you see the numbers here. So the growth engine starts even downstream. So the preparation, Jose, is really important as we start to look at that pipeline and how we use education to employment as sort of that gateway to for Latinos to be even more impactful, right?
Oh, I mean, 100%. The fact of the matter is that really all technologies has the potential to be a great equalizer to democratize all aspects of industries. In healthcare specifically, AI has the opportunity to allow the fact that regardless of your socioeconomic status, regardless of your your geolocation, wherever you are in the world, it has the ability to make sure that you can get the same access to care and equal care, regardless if you get sick in the middle of the country in Oklahoma, as opposed to Istanbul, to San Juan, Puerto Rico, to Boston, Massachusetts, right, where some of the top academic centers are. So the fact is, right now, depending on where you go, like if you have a really advanced or really kind of strange type of a cancer or rare disease process, you have to go to like very specialized centers. Well, ideally, AI can democratize that and say that regardless of where you live or where you come from or how much money you have, that you can get the same amount of care wherever you are, and you don't have to travel to these kind of ivory towers of bastions of academia. So that's the reality of what AI can do. And from typical underrepresented communities that have been left out of certain industries, AI allows you to have the power to equalize. Like you don't have to have all the infrastructure that these advanced companies have. You can actually just use an advanced tool and be able to do the same faster, quicker, and less expensive with these more advanced tools than you ever can before. And that's true for all technology. And to Marcelo's perspective, you know, this is why any type of new technology has always allowed us more free time and allowed us to then focus on more advanced, more creative, more complex thinking. And ideally, AI will do the same. But we have to educate ourselves, and we can't fall behind. And we have an opportunity right now because, as you mentioned at the beginning, Guillermo, it's kind of a level playing field. Everyone's kind of playing catch up. Because even any large company you go into that has petabytes and petabytes of data, that data was never structured and never conceptualized to be applied to machine learning or artificial intelligence. So yes, they may have a ton of data, but that data is not segmented, not annotated, and not structurally sound to be able to go into, you know, plug and play into some sort of AI application. So everyone's kind of playing catch up and trying to figure out, all right, well, we have all this data. What does that mean? Which applications, like, what should I be using for my data? What is the most appropriate types of application? So we have the opportunity right now, if we focus on this specifically from an educational perspective. You know, everyone talks about coding as a second language, right? Well, we're already ahead of the game if we're bilingual, right? That's just the reality. So we have that perspective. If you start now teaching coding, and on top of that, you start teaching artificial intelligence, I mean, we're a quadruple threat. And throw on top of that, we can dance. So that's like a five type threat right there. But
you can't have Latino without AI. Right?
That's right. Yeah. Take that one to the bank. So, you know, but yeah, that's the reality. We need to be teaching our kids these perspectives, and the earlier we start teaching them, that's the greater advantage. Same thing with any kind of you know, complex subject matter, and you build on it slowly. And it's the other thing that I think everyone tends to get when you haven't been a part of the industry, or we haven't been a part of anything that looks complex. It's really that fear of even starting. But if we can get our kids to start learning it, not even our kids, I mean, retraining is going to be equally as important. So middle career, end career types of professionals, start learning to code, start understanding AI. It's the biggest hurdle is just the fear of starting. Once you start, it's not as complex as it seems. And the thing is that kind of gatekeeping has always been true for any type of new technology. So we need to overcome our fear, regardless if we're 12 or regardless if we're 62. There's no reason why you can't stop learning or learn something new. There's no reason why you can't learn AI. So we need to create these pathways for our community across the age spectrum to be able to learn about it, to be able to not fear it, and ultimately to master it and take control of the future with it.
Right. Well, I think that's a good point. And I think these pathways, I think one of the things that I hear most is like, oh, I don't know that I could learn AI. And so we actually are starting to prove that, Jose, with some of the things that we've done with these AI literacy boot camps. Right. We've had students as early as 14 and some as late as 54. But I think the common theme, and maybe Marcelo, you can jump in here, is, I don't know if I can do it, right? I don't know that I have the, I don't know what the barriers are, but sometimes it's our own mind, and the reality is I wonder if that's cultural too. What do you you have any thoughts on that, Marcelo?
No, absolutely. Let me first add something to what Jose said. I think what we need to understand is in our cohort, many times our language has been a barrier, right, for us to do many things. Things like generative AI today are actually eliminating that barrier 100%. There are services that people can actually access in any language because generative AI will actually translate on demand, right? So every single product and service in the market is going to become basically language activated, no matter what language you use. So keep that in mind. For us specifically, even though Spanish is the second largest spoken language here in the US, we know it's still a barrier. But to your question, can you repeat the question?
The question was, the question was really around, I think sometimes you talked about language as a barrier, but sometimes even culture, or why do we think there's sometimes a fear of learning about AI? What are some of the thoughts there?
I think it might be a hypothesis that we still think that coding and building applications, it is as complex as it was maybe 10, 15 years ago, right? In my work at ThoughtWorks, I see my colleagues, right? And I feel every day, I feel I need to know more and I want to learn more, right? Because they have been using Copilots and things for many years, but today they build generative AI applications, like I was building a Lego game when I was a kid, right? Because technology is so easy to assemble, right? As Lego blocks, as services. The only thing you need to know is just a computer language, not all of them. Access a platform like, I don't know, like LangChain, for example, which is a platform to build different generative AI products. And I tell you, I've seen, we have done a boot camp for kids of 10 to 12 years old. And it's only one day. And at the end of the day, they built their GPT, right? And it's incredible. They are 10 years old. I remember when I was 10 years old. I was not even thinking about those things. So to answer your question, I think it is in our mind. I think we need to understand that these capabilities are not as complex as they were in the past. And also be curious. There is plenty of free training from universities, large technology companies, what you guys are doing at Conectado. There are many opportunities to learn, but we want to be we need to be intentional. We want to be curious, because if we are not curious, we're going to be left behind. So it's on us now, right? It's 100% on us. There are no barriers. The only barriers are here, maybe.
Right. No, I think so. And I think, like you were saying, we saw some of that, even, some of the students that we even brought to the boot camp. There was a fear at first, was like, can I even learn about this stuff? And I think if everyone's on the same playing field. So if you can break it down into, what it is, like Jose was talking about earlier, and start to bring them up, as I call them, from white belt to black belt. Everyone is learning this. I want to kind of show something here, and it's interesting that even myself, I'm not, I was a CIO at Cisco, but I'm not a coder. I didn't code. I would kind of boss people around to code, but I never did coding. But now, I have like you talked about, a co-pilot helping me as I go and develop new things, as I do prompting to develop images to better market our business. Those are things that we're doing. But I think I want to go back to something that we were hitting on earlier, and that's bias, and tying it back to education and employment, because one of the things that when we did the report, and Anna and I talked about this last year, was I just asked this question, and this was a year ago, right? I said, hey, tell me give me an image of a CIO, a CEO in the US. And I asked it over and over again, and it kept coming back with something like this. And and then I asked, can you give me an image of a Mexican person? And that's what you see on the screen here. This is the image that it has. And in fact, there was one question that I asked it was, okay, show me an image of a Mexican American person. And it had the same image with the flag, with the US flag in the back. So that was the image there, and you see something here with the Floridian. But I think this ties back to, even going into back to what we were talking about with how the pipeline works, how education works, and if the growth engine and the jobs happen to be in the places where Latinos are, how we could actually start to become the developers, the coders. But again, the businesses, the corporations have to make conscious and intentional efforts to hire those people. But I want to kind of unpack that a little bit. Jose, you were talking about bias a little bit earlier, but it all starts with, who are the people that are developing these things, and why not us, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think touching on a point that we just talked about, but you and Marcelo brought more, and then I see some of the Q&A about the importance of focusing on the older population and the reskilling and upskilling of people in the mid-career and late career is important. Not just, it's equally as important as we're doing with focusing on kids that are still in high school and younger, right? It's important for all age groups. And I'll tell you, if mi abuelita was still alive, if she learned AI, she would be just a threat to nature. So, and I think that's probably true of all of our abuelas, ¿verdad? Regardless if you grew up in El Verde in Puerto Rico or wherever you're from. So, I think it's important, and we have to make sure we don't forget that ultimately the generations that we're in and the generations that have come before us, they're the ones that have been most disaffected by systemic inequalities, and we have to make sure that AI doesn't perpetuate that. And if we don't ensure that we are helping our most disadvantaged to be able to not be left behind with these types of technologies, then we're doing a disservice. We're doing a moral and ethical disservice. So and this in front of you is a perfect example. I mean, we see these types of biases in so many things. From a healthcare perspective, we've seen this a lot. And the reason is it's understanding it causes us to have to go back and have a serious discussion and look in the mirror for things that have been not some of the darker days in humanity. We want to talk about where historically this data came from. A really easy one is like zip code data, right? Zip code data comes from redlining, at least here in the United States, right? So these things that were instituted, Jim Crow laws, things like that, where we were separated by ethnicity or race, which ultimately tied to your socioeconomic status. So if you use that as a data set to determine whether someone should or should not receive X, Y, or Z, and not understanding the systemic inequalities that went into that, then you're actually coding that into the AI. And one of the questions that came up was asking, well, how do you find biases? Number one, you really have, it's more of a societal thing. So being able to look at it and have those conversations and say, okay, this is why this data is showing this. And the other one, if you're just looking for straight code to look at code, I wrote an article at MIT, which I shared with you guys, that I talk about systemic inequality begetting AI inequality. So that's a good place to start. Another one, there's a great book by Dr. Joy Bolawini out of MIT. They turned into a documentary called Coded Bias, same name in the book. I would check it out. If you have Netflix or if you want to check out the book, fantastic. There's the AI Justice League, a great place to go out and look for ways to find these things. Google has a Google bias identifier as well that's open source. There's a lot of codes out there, a lot of applications you can use for this. But if I use that example of the coded bias from Dr. Bolawini, she was working on an application. She's very dark skinned. Her background is African, and she was looking at she was trying to create an application for facial recognition software. So she purchased every facial recognition software that was over the counter. Same from like IBM, from Google, from Facebook, Amazon, everybody, the top tier ones. And these were the same ones that were being used by the criminal justice system to be able to predict or say, hey, this person might be on a wanted list, that this person might be a criminal. And none of them recognized her face. None of them, zero. It would always say no face detected. she happened to have a mask, which is a Mardi Gras mask. That was a white Mardi Gras mask. And when she would put it on, it would identify her face and said face detected. So when she went to go look at the code, the data sets that were utilized for these applications, it was like 98% were white men. So that's why it didn't recognize her face, because the data set didn't have representation of her to be able to do that. And then when she went back and looked at the actual teams that created these facial recognition software, they were also created all by white men. So the issue is, if you don't have a diverse team at the table creating this to begin with, you're not going to stop and think, oh, you know what, maybe we should include someone that looks like me. Maybe we should include someone that looks different than the 99% data set that we have in here. There's a video if you want me to try to show it from the boot camp. It's a little longer. We can show a little bit of it if you want to see that.
Yeah, why don't you pull that up? Let's play maybe a minute or two of it.
Okay.
Because I think it's an important point. And tying it back to, those of us that are on this, and I think there's a comment in here about, are we planning to talk about, and be more strategic and tactical around products and services. There are actual boot camps that we're driving, and we'll be driving even more of that beyond this webinar.
Is this full screen for you? Oh, all right. I'll play. It's 8 minutes, but I'll play like 2 minutes of it, like you said.
You should avoid mixing Barbie with biased AI image generators. What does a typical prisoner look like? What about a lawyer, a nurse, a drug dealer? What about a fast food worker, a cleaner, a terrorist, or a CEO? These are all images created by an artificial intelligence image generator called Midjourney, which creates unique images based off of simple word prompts. These AI image generators have exploded in popularity thanks to their impressive results and ease of use. Within a few years, as much as 90% of the images on the internet could be artificially generated. Given that generative AI will have a huge impact in shaping our visual landscape, it's important to understand that the reality it presents can often be distorted, where harmful biases relating to gender, race, age, and skin colour can be more exaggerated and more extreme than in the real world. Leonardo Nicoletti and Dina Bass at Bloomberg Technology generated and analysed more than 5,000 images created by Stable Diffusion. They prompted it to generate portraits of workers in different professions and sorted the images according to skin tone and perceived gender. They found that higher paying professions like CEO, lawyer, and politician were dominated by lighter skin tones, while subjects with darker skin tones were more commonly associated with lower income jobs like dishwasher, janitor, and fast food worker. A similar story emerged when categorizing by gender, with higher income jobs such as doctors, CEOs, and engineers being predominantly represented by men, whilst professions like cashier, social worker, and housekeeper were mostly represented by women. These racial and gender biases were found to be stronger than the reality of what was recorded in the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. For instance, women make up 39% of doctors in the US, but only appeared in 7% of the images. These exaggerated biases that AI systems create are known as representational harms. These are harms which degrade certain social groups by reinforcing the status quo or by amplifying stereotypes.
So just examples. In Dr. Balawini's example, the criminal justice applications that were being used, they actually tested it on the Congressional Black Caucus. I think it identified something as 90 to 98% of our congressional Congress folks as potential criminals. So since then, it's these applications, at least from an over-the-counter perspective, have been worked on and improved. But these are the things that have been out there and have been out there before. There's been some other Q&A regulations and other things have been able to catch up with them.
Right. No, that's pretty interesting and eye-opening. And I can tell you, initially when I did this work, more than a year ago, I could not find a CEO that looks like me in Midjourney, or unless I specifically prompted it to. And we'll be able to teach things like that. But it really is going back to, how does it start from the very beginning, where we're training these models, and we have the people that understand the cultural nuances that can and the language nuances that can get these models trained from the very beginning. So I think maybe we should. There's a couple of questions here. I think based on the comment, I don't think I finished answering that. Yes, there'll be more strategic when developing even talks and trainings about how to be more specific on AI products and services and developing those skills. In fact, we just did a boot camp this weekend on the AI literacy. So that right there is something that we'll do. And then Anna, we want to kind of even double down on that, right? And help the community really understand what are the necessary skills. How do we go about that? How do we influence even corporations that need to go hire this community that are developing those skills, right? You're on mute.
Absolutely, G. And Francisco Valle, to your question, that's one of our most important goals of this series, to create awareness and to show you and to share all the many ways you can nurture and feed the database within AI, which is completely different than the Google or the any other database and resource that you've used before, with our real information, right? The Latino donor collaborative information. We Latinos are the 5th largest economy in the world. You can't have stereotypes when you have that kind of power, right? It's dysfunctional for every American. So for all Americans and for all the world that is using AI that follows stereotypes and that doesn't give the complete information, you're making them a disfavor. It's a huge blind spot, specifically with Latinos. It's a humongous blind spot. Like this gentleman we're sharing, if people ask for characteristics of Latinos in every way, professionals, non-professionals, women, men, young, old, we need to have accurate data. And that data has to go there. And the more, first of all, that we pour it in, right? Even going to ChatGPT and educate ChatGPT, believe it or not, it's that logic and that simple, all the way to creating Wikipedia pages. I spoke to one of the precursors of AI at a very, very important school that participated on this since 40 years ago. And he was saying that, for better or for worse, a lot of the feed to AI comes from Wikipedia pages. We're not that active there. Have you noticed? So let's start pouring in, the people that we know that need to be there, ourselves if we think we should, situations, wars, historic times that haven't been included in the regular curriculum when we go to school or when we go to conferences, right? We need to feed it. So sorry, I needed to say that. I was looking at your video, Jose, and it's just devastating.
Yeah. I remember, Anna, when we first did those images, and it was like, okay, is there a CEO that looks like me?
Exactly.
And it just, and by the way, if you remember, I asked it, give me a board member, and it was an older white man, in a conference room. And so I think it goes back to this community is very.
Gee, remember that when I told you that when we Google, we try to look for, so give me a Latina entrepreneur, and at the very beginning it said there is not enough information.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's right.
That's horrendous, right?
So, and like to your point, Anna, it's about data. We have to get the good data in there, which is what the LDC is doing, what you guys are doing a phenomenal job with. The other component, though, is we need to get engineers that look like us into the roles working on this, because if we were there and someone just did one quick test and be like, oh, I'd be interested. Is there a Latino entrepreneur? You told me there's not enough data. That person would be like, all right, there's a problem. We should not be releasing this like this. They could get ahead of it. And it's not until we in the community start playing around with it and start doing the reinforcement learning part of it that they're like, oh, we didn't realize that. I wonder why you didn't realize that, because you don't have anyone on the team that looks like us.
Exactly. You know, we always think algorithm, oh, it's so objective, it's mathematics. No, the algorithms are created by humans. So if the humans that are creating the algorithms don't have an idea of who we are, right, they're obviously won't produce it and build it to get to know us better. So yes, I agree with you. We need to put people that look like us from our community in general, that look like all the array of Latinos in this country into that workforce.
Ana, there's a question here that maybe you can address. With Latinos making up less than 2.1% of TV execs and 1.8% of film execs, and it references the UCLA report, and that report only being done every 5 years. Given the advancement of AI, will we giving more exponential in the same amount of time? What are your perspectives on its intersection with entertainment?
So Miguel, first of all, great. I'm glad you're here. I know Miguel, he's great. And I think you have a really good point. First of all, the report that we do, the Latino Donor Collaborative, does a report about Latinos and specifically Latinos. We're the only report that goes only for Latinos. And we actually are the only report that, because we're self-funded, we go by studio, by company, by channel, by platform. I mean, we're not afraid of saying the truth, right? We can tell you how many Latinos exist as leads, directors, as producers, as writers, showrunners in every company in Hollywood. And we actually issue it twice a year, Miguel, in September and then the full year in January. So you are so right on point. As you know, with the velocity that this industry is advancing, we need to be very, very careful as to review that report every time it's issued and compare it to reality. Because, you know, benchmarks will help us to push not only Latinos, but non-Latinos to be much more accurate and truthful and dedicated and intentional about moving away from those stereotypes. And so I agree with you that reports always help. That's why we issue these reports, and we issue them for free. So every one of you in this talk will have the capacity of decide whether they are representing us well or not. And then, you know, do something, right? You can write letters, you can stop consuming that. There are the shows that I always give as an example. The shows about police or firemen or detectives in LA that don't have one single LA detective, police, or fireman, right? When the police force in LA is 56%. So, you know, we need great representation in Hollywood as we need great representation in AI. One comes from the other one. Both need to be fixed.
Right.
I wanted to add something to that. I will quote our friend Guillermo here when he says, "Why not us?" Right? When you look at the media industry and how it is going to be disrupted by generative AI, the question for us is, can we the ones building the next generation media companies that showcase us the way we are? Yeah. And that's 100% of a business opportunity, of an inclusive opportunity for all of us. And we just need to ask ourselves, why not us? As Guillermo always inspired us to ask the question.
I agree with you. I think the Hollywood industry is a difficult, you know, one to crack. But I agree with you that, you know, AI, and we have the examples in this room, right? 3 of you are leaders in AI, in tech. And so, yes, absolutely, we need to. And we're working, by the way, with CEOs of entertainment industry to create this awareness. It's about money, right? The blind spots cost money. And specifically in entertainment, with so many. So first of all, we're only 3% of the leads. right, of entertainment, but also half of those are positive, not Narcos or Mayans MC or Queen of the South or one of those stereotypes, good ones. And the good ones are extremely successful. The success rate of the very small part of Hollywood that has Latino leads is huge. Wednesday, The Lincoln Lawyer, The Last of Us, Andor, Will Trent, those little amount of shows are crazy successful. So the blind spot of not having us is huge. And that's our conversations constantly, Marcelo, with the CEOs of studios and networks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see a question here from Maria, and I actually want to have Maria reach out to me as well, because since we're missing out, I think Jose, you were hitting on this earlier, but we're missing out on the Spanish-speaking Latinos over 40 that are left behind. Their ability to learn AI and new technologies is far from reaching. Adelante works directly with them, and we could use additional help and resource to support this community in Colorado. Well, Maria, I'm from Pueblo, Colorado. So I'm very interested in this. If you're still on, would want you to reach out and see how we can help. And I think, but the other thing I would say is the power of AI, and we're seeing this with some of the students that we work with, is engaging the parents who in many cases don't speak English, but using the power of AI to help do the translation for everything from how they look at college scholarships or even internships where their children are going to school or where they'll go to school. These are things that were challenges for some of these families before. And we're seeing that, by using this as a tool, not as a replacement for human interaction, but as a tool to say, no, it's like, it's okay. It's okay for you. And sometimes that engagement and that fear factor goes away when this starts to happen. So I would definitely personally want to connect with you, Maria, but I would say again, why not us? And let's not be afraid of it. Let's put our arms around it, right?
Absolutely. And can I add that some very relevant people were watching this presentation. They already asked me for your video, Jose. They want to bring it to the board. So I think that's great.
Oh, I shared it with a couple of folks already. I also shared Code of Bias, and I'll share one more. I was in for the project I worked with the White House OSTP, they did a documentary, and I discussed this as well. I can share that one too. It's a freely available documentary called Pandemic, and I discussed this amongst the other AI things that we did for that project.
Great, thank you so much. That's great. I want to address quickly the first question from Valeria. Hi, Valeria, how are you? And she mentions that sometimes we tend to stay away from things that we don't know. And one of you mentioned it too. And she says, it's not all or nothing, right? It's like we have to start venturing into this, and not only as users and as viewers, but we also have to start just taking action. And I may not she says, we may think we don't understand it perfectly. And then our instinct would be to stay away, but we should actively do something. And going to what Marcelo was saying before, it's true. A lot of that power is in our hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to feel comfortable not understanding things perfectly, because honestly, this technology is evolving so fast that we will continuously be behind, right? And that's okay, right? That's totally okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think I want to add in here, because I think what I want everyone to walk away with is, by the way, a person of a different color or a person of a different race we're all in the same boat, right? This is that moment, that opportunity, and I call it a light speed moment, where we go, how do we move this entertainment industry from the 2.1%? How do you move a technology industry? By the way, you look at technology, technology is 5% of representation. Well, if you look at where technology, I live in California. So, the story is in the heart of the state that has some of the most technology in the world, including, I come from Silicon Valley, or I built my career in Silicon Valley, which has less than 5% representation. So the heart of tech that has a good 42% of its K through 12 students happen to be Latino. So our pipeline is there. So we need to leverage this light speed moment to go, how do we then prepare ourselves and our next generation to change those numbers, and not just move them from 5 to 5.2 to 5.5%, but to move them to, wait, our population's almost 20% now. How do we get parity? How do we get closer to that? That's that jump. It's exponential jump opportunity, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to address a question that from Aaron on the questions and answer list. And he says, how do we tackle this issue with young people wanting to be in media rather than wanting to be in STEM? And I want to say that it is true that that's a trend, but specifically in the Latino community, I want to share, we did our first report about engineering with SHIP, Society of Hispanic Engineering Professionals, last year. We're doing a second one this year. And just to give you a number on how we are, I mean, our community, the parents, our leaders within the community are tackling this alleged, problem. In 2010, 4% of engineering students were Latinos. 2010, that's 14 years ago. By 2021, 16% were Latinos. So it doesn't look like Latinos are actually taking media against technology. Actually, Latinos are very much into engineering, which is great. And so we're heading in the right direction. We just need to continue feeding our kids into those careers, and we'll have plenty of work for us to tackle all of our challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've seen the increase in science and engineering degrees, right? I have it on the charts here, and even more so in, again, maybe the numbers a little bit off of a lower base, but you see these numbers in PhDs also going up. So the number you see on here in terms of students enrolled in Hispanic serving institutions just represents those in college and university. But there's another 10 million students in something that's called the Hispanic serving school district. Almost 10 million students there. So we represent a large part of the student population, and if we can continue to increase those numbers in science and engineering and AI, everyone should have at least an AI certification. So I think that's what we intend to do also with this kind of programming.
Yeah. Wow.
Let's see.
Questions keep popping. Do we have time? I think we have time for one more question.
One more question, I think. Yeah. Let me throw this one at Marcelo as well. It says for G, but I'm gonna pass it off to Marcelo. with
I
known
will not be
issues,
able to answer.
with known issues of bias in AI, what are the best practices you recommend to CTOs and CIOs for developing unbiased AI systems that fairly represent Latinos or Latino data?
Okay. So I was honored to be part of a team that was developing the responsible AI practices for the United Nations, right? I make sure I sent you the link because that document is in the United Nations website. And in that document, we put together a lot of practices and tools to manage the whole software delivery lifecycle, from where you actually are designing an AI-enabled product up until that product is already in the market or in society, and you need to put together some guardrails and monitoring systems. Let me tell you something. These practices are not only for people that are developing these tools. I will really suggest that you read the document. Again, it's free to access. It's in the United Nations site, Responsible AI Technology Practices, because I do believe that each of us as consumers, as business leaders, as board members, as executives, as just people, we need to really understand what questions to ask whenever we are using or intending to use an AI product. So there are many practices. I can give you a list of more than 10 different software engineering and design thinking practices to build products that are reduce data bias, increase data privacy, but also help us to develop products that are inclusive, right, from the design perspective, right? Thinking about, and this is not because of generative AI, it's coming from before. Think about products that for people that have trouble looking at colors, right? And we're showing a heat map to someone that maybe doesn't have the ability to look at colors. So from there to data bias and responsible technology practices, these are things that we all need to understand. That's the way we're going to be able to not only build the products, but also be guardians of the future of AI for our organizations and for society in general. So make sure that I put the link somewhere.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think it's important, Diego, and as Marcelo says, is to think there's from a CTO, CIO perspective, is first of all, how do I make sure that my business is safe, right? Especially at a very large corporation level. How do I make sure that it's safe? How do I make sure that it has ethical data practices? And how do I ensure that I'm doing what I need to do to represent not only the biases and the where the world is going to, especially the United States, but I'll just give you in my two cases. You know, I'm on the board of Blue Shield of California. Guess what? Blue Shield of California's members are 42% Latino. So you have to look at it for what are the constituents and who are the members and who are the stakeholders. I'm also on the board of Jack in the Box. Guess what? 81% of the employees in Jack in the Box are Latino. 81%. And a large percentage of customers, especially during peak hours, are happen to be Latino. So this is not just a there's an ethical component to it, but there's also, we also as leaders have to tie it back to, this is a business imperative. This is not just a imperative for los pobrecitos, right? This is like, no, this is the business thing. This is the right thing that for our economy, for our GDP.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we've come to our closing. First of all, thank you so much to this fabulous speakers. Thank you for your knowledge, for your time. Thanks for the the more education to come with these links that you will share. Please, I would say I do that. I follow them on LinkedIn because they have always so much to say and so much to enrich us with. Thank you to the three of you. G, you are a lighting rod in our board, as always. Thank you. And remember, just closing this event, this is the third of an edition of 9 altogether. So we have 6 more. The next one, the next edition of this series is Building Your AI Skill Set for the Future. And it's scheduled for the last week of May. If you want to know the specific dates of the next 6, please sign up to our newsletter on our website, latinodonorcollaborative.org. I'm sorry, we're a nonprofit.org. And follow us on our social media. We have a lot of information to share every day. We bring you the news. We're the nerds per excellence, by the way, about all the contributions of Latinos in this country. And with that, thank you again. Have a wonderful night and see you next time.